साथियों, आप सबका स्वागत है। वेलकम टू everybody here in this fourth webinar of RT Forum. We are going to talk on the issue of universalization of education and emerging challenges from COVID-19 pandemic. We have a very eminent panelist, very eminent personalities with us. Professor Santa Sinha, we all know she is pioneering uh, about the child rights, and she is source of inspiration for activists all over the country. Professor Santa Sinha is former chairperson of NCPCR. It was first. It is first NCPCR she headed and served 2 terms. She laid the foundation of NCPCR and built institutional mechanism, structures, and processes for monitoring child rights. She is known for her work on child labor also. Professor Santa Sinha and her organization withdrawn over 10 lakhs children from work and put them into school. She served as a professor of political science in University of Hyderabad. She represented many institutions, organizations in government as well as out of the government, like CABE, NCRT, different committees of MHRD, Home Affairs, Rural Development, Ministry of WCD, National Law School, National Law Commission, Ministry of Labor, and many other organizations related to women and child rights. She is Padam Shri and Magsaysay Award winner. So she is here with us in this webinar, and we would like to welcome her. Welcome Santaji in this webinar. We have with us Dr. Kishore Singh. Dr. Kishore Singh is a very renowned, internationally recognized spokesperson on right to education. He holds a PhD in international law for the University of Paris. He had served UNESCO for many years and has long-standing professional experience in field of right to education. Upon his retirement from UNESCO in 2009, he was appointed as UN Special Rapporteur in United Nations on right to education and held this position from August 2010 to July 2016. In that capacity, he represented to the Human Rights Council and to United Nations General Assembly annual reports on areas of priority concern for the international community. Dr. Kishore Singh has been participating in a number of high-level fora and public events, including ministerial meetings, and remains engaged in informal consultations with the state representatives, international organizations, as well as civil society. We have with us, welcome Kishore Singh ji in this webinar, and we have also Dr. Praveen Jha. Dr. Praveen Jha always been supportive with our cause and Right to Education Forum. He is professor on economics and chairperson of the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, School of Social Sciences in JNU. He is one of the editors of the Tricontinental Journal, Agrarian South Journal of Political Economy. His major area of research and teaching is political economy of development, with focus on Indian economy, labor economics, agriculture economics, economics of education, public financing, and history of economic thought. He has authored and edited many books and articles in the different journals. So I would like to welcome Professor Praveen Jha. Welcome Praveen Jha ji. साथियों, ये वेबिनार हम समर्पित करना चाहते हैं उन अपने लाखों बच्चों को जो कि लॉकडाउन में अपने माँ बाप की आजीविका समाप्त हो जाने के कारण भूखे प्यासे दोपहर की तपती धूप में जलती हुई सड़क पर सैकड़ों किलोमीटर की यात्रा में अपने माँ बाप के साथ कदम से कदम मिलाकर अपने नन्हे नन्हे पैरों के सहारे पैदल अपने गांव की ओर लौट रहे हैं। वे बीच में थक जरूर जाते हैं, लेकिन उनके हौसले अभी भी बुलंद हैं। यह वेबिनार उन बच्चों को हम समर्पित करते हैं जो गांव में या शहर की गरीब बस्तियों में भूख से लड़ते हुए ऑनलाइन शिक्षा से वंचित हैं और सामान्य स्थिति होने पर अपने स्कूलों के फिर से खुलने का इंतजार कर रहे हैं। ये उन लड़कियों के लिए समर्पित है जो पितृसत्ता से लड़ते हुए शिक्षा के अधिकार कानून की वजह से स्कूल तक पहुंच गई, मगर इस संकट की घड़ी में बहुत सारे खतरों के बीच फिर से अपने स्कूल वापस लौटने के सपने अपने आंखों में सजोए हुए हैं। उन बच्चों के लिए जो विकलांगता के शिकार हैं मगर सारी बाधाओं को तोड़ते हुए अपनी शिक्षा को जारी रखना चाहते हैं। अंत में हम उन सभी मजदूरों, उनके परिवारों, जो भारतीय शासक वर्ग की संवेदनहीनता और तुगलकी फरमान के चलते रेल की पटरियों पर या सड़कों पर चलते हुए कुचल दिए गए या फिर घर पहुंचते पहुंचते भूख के कारण उन्होंने दम तोड़ दिया, उन सबको हम ये समर्पित करते हैं। और उन लोगों को जो मौत के आगोश में चले गए, उनको हम श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करते हुए अपना ये वेबिनार शुरू करना चाहते हैं। और अब मैं पहले वक्ता के तौर पर हम सब की बहुत ही प्रिय और हमारे लिए बहुत ही इंस्पिरेशन का स्रोत रही प्रोफेसर शांता सिन्हा को इनवाइट करता हूं। I would like to invite Professor Shanta Sinha to address this webinar.
Thank you very much, Ambarish, and I think you have made such a very profound and touching dedication of this session to the millions of families that are in utmost distress, and they should not have been like that. And I think it is a responsibility of all of us to be with those families. All that we can do is perhaps at this moment pray and put pressure on the government to reach out to these families and not give up hope, and constantly keep questioning the government on their inaction to in fact give support to these families that are under the greatest of threat to life and dignity. Now, since you began with this, I think all of us know about the plight of children who are out of schools today. They are so visible now. As you said, they are walking on streets, they're walking barefoot, they're walking under the sun, they're hungry, they have health issues, they're anxious. Some children are just being delivered while walking on the streets, and they are little infants. So, I just wanted to know whether these children have ever been captured in the data of out-of-school children in the government at all. The government all the time says that 98% of children are already enrolled in schools. We know, as activists on the field, we know the truth. And the truth is, maybe their names are there registered in the attendance register, but are they actually attending? Are they actually going to schools? Why are they not attending? And why is it that they have been stuck in sweatshops, in farms, as child labor? Why are children being trafficked? And why is it that the government has not paid attention to them at all? Is it their not right to education? Is it not a fundamental right? And it is not just the COVID that has alerted us to this. We all know on the ground that there is, I would call it a data terrorism that is going on. Governments does not want to accept that children are out of school, and that there is a lot that has to be done for children who are out of school. First of all, they have to correct data and tell the truth about how many children are actually attending school, how many children are not attending school, not give us statistics. Give us the names of each one of these children and tell us about each one of them on why is it that they are not in school. I think we will have to correct this data gap that there is. Government of India all the time boasts of children being in school. It is lie. It is full of lies. And because this has happened, now the entire discourse has shifted to this, that because children are all in school, the problem now is of improvement of quality of education in school. That is another big lie. You start on a lie that children are all in schools, and then you start on the assumption that because they are in schools, quality of education is the issue. Certainly, I think there is an argument for quality of education, but then you have not looked at the link between inclusive education, democratization of schools, getting every child to school, and making that as a part of an objective of education, the link between that and improvement of quality of education. Can there be quality of education? Can there be any improvement in quality of education if children are out of schools? If poor children are not respected? If they're not given dignity? If the system does not know how to care for them? If the system does not welcome them? If the system does not embrace them? Why am I saying they're not welcoming them? Are there enough schools? Are there enough hostels? Are there enough teachers? Of course, you will then give me examples of schools that have teachers but no children. But this is a distortion. I don't want to get into this aspect at all, but if you go school by school, village by village, and do a decentralized analysis of the number of children in schools and out of schools and the infrastructure that is available, you will find the truth speaks differently. Children are out of schools. One, the data has to be corrected. Children are not going to school because they're not being respected. They are children of the poor, marginalized, Dalit, Adivasi, and other children whom the schools don't respect. And I'm saying the schools don't respect with an evidence that the schools are just not available. I'm not blaming the school teacher at all. I think we have to keep the school teacher on the side of us. They are as much, I think, sometimes victims of the system as children themselves are. Overall, I think the education system has failed them. So, because there is a demand for education, you find the poor are sending their children to private schools. Is that not enough indication that the poor want to send their children to schools? And why is it that the private schools are growing all over the country in a rapid speed? There is a market demand for education. Why doesn't the government schools make their schools possible for the poor, just so that the poor don't have to spend so much to send them to private schools? And this has resulted in gross inequities and exclusion in education system. So much so that children are out of schools, there is no justice for them, and their education is sealed. Let me come to the COVID issue. I'll just do 5 points, and then I think my fellow panelists have so much to share. We know that, we have to keep repeating it, although we know, which Ambarish has so beautifully stated, there is hunger, there are health issues, there is anxiety, there is uncertainty, and this exacerbates the inequities in society and iniquitous relations even in terms of education. We know that children who have been abandoned in work sites have been left to take care of themselves. We have really listening to stories from Jaipur, from Hyderabad, and so many places. They have been trafficked, the traffickers have run away, and the children are left nowhere. We also know that these children might end up in more exploitative situation, more dangerous circumstances. We also know how children who were in KGBB, in hostels, abruptly were sent back home. It's not that they don't go home during vacations, but here they have been sent back home, into a home where there is no food, where there is hunger, where there are no incomes, where there are wages to be earned, but nothing is happening. And it is in these circumstances you find how girls especially have been pushed into more and more household work. And there is such a great risk of many of them getting married. So, this also is causing violence, depression, uncertainty on children. then you know now the Kharif crop is coming. There are stories after stories where children who are being sent to work now in agriculture. Normally, during summer vacations, these children would not have been sent to work. Let me tell you that they would have been encouraged to stay at home because they're students. But now there is no food at home. There is no social security system. People are fighting. Of course, now there is some NREGA work going. Otherwise, there's so much hunger. So children are being pushed to work. Our children are social security system. Then put it in. Let the government put it in its list. We have PDS. We have NREGA program. We have a child labor program to see that children overcome hunger. Let me tell you, children cannot be our social security, means of social security. They have their rights, they have to be in school, and they must not be allowed to go to work. And government has to make every arrangement to see that the law on child labor, the law on child right education is actually implemented. Then the other issue that has come up is that about online education. Actually, I heard Govinda also speak earlier. There is no need to worry about closure of schools. How many times there were hartals and bands and schools have been closed and they got reopened. So why are we so worried that schools are being closed? Even when I went to school, the schools got closed for 6 months because of agitation in the government. These things happen when there are elections, schools get closed. But now there is such an alarm about schools going closed that you introduce surreptitiously online education. There's a great experimentation going on in private schools, and now governments have caught on with this experimentation of online education. And I fear to look at the implications of this online experimentation that is going on, which can further divide and further get iniquitous. And perhaps it would help all the software people, experts, and companies marketing their online products more than the children themselves. We have to worry about this. It's okay, yeah, for schools to be closed for some time, but make sure that they don't go for work. Let children be children. And now that is the argument I would take. There is a pressure on class 10 board examination. In many places, the board examination, in many states have not finished their board examination. And now with such a huge gap of some 2 months of closure of schools, all of a sudden some states have decided that they should hold board exams. I know it is happening in Tamil Nadu. I know it is happening in Telangana. Come on, if the schools were not functioning for 2 months, if there's so much uncertainty and anxiety, is it possible for children, poor children, to compete with all other children to take the board exam? In any case, the new education policy talked about abandoning 10 plus 2 and making secondary school as one whole, 9, 10, 11, 12. Why don't we seize this opportunity in uniting, putting together the secondary school as one holistic school, and then say that let's not have 10th class board exam. Also, let children seamlessly go into the 11th grade. When they can seamlessly introduce online examination, I don't see why the government cannot seamlessly introduce a secondary school education policy that was so nicely put that maybe this is one of the only best recommendations that the new education policy had done. Why don't they introduce a secondary school education that is together? So while I'm saying this, let me just appreciate the work of NGOs on the ground and also some school teachers who have tried to link children to the online classes. In Bihar, teachers who are linking to online classes. Let me also appreciate and commend the work of NGOs who are mitigating hunger and poverty, who are stopping child labor, who are providing reading material, who are tracking children. Finally, I would like to end by saying that this can be overcome if there is an element of trust in the system. Let us trust the Gram Panchayats and the school management committees. Let us involve them in tracking children. Let us trust the school teachers and their ability to teach. There's so much cynicism about school teachers. That cannot be there. Give them respect, freedom, and autonomy as professionals. Let us trust the parent and appreciate their demand for education and the sacrifices they're already making. Let us trust children and their thirst and hunger to learn and excel. And I think if there is a trust that is running through, justice for children will be rendered. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your encouraging speech. Uh, Now I will invite Dr. Kishore Singh. Dr. Kishore Singh is a farmer rapporteur on right to education in United States. Yeah, Dr. Kishore Singh.
नमस्कार सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को मेरा नमस्कार। और मैं अमरीश और उनके आरटी फोरम को भी इस बात के लिए धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं कि इन्होंने हमें ये अवसर दिया कि हम शिक्षा के अधिकार के बारे में बात करें। मुझे प्रोफेसर शांति सिन्हा ने जो कहा वो सुनकर के बड़ी खुशी हुई, जिन्होंने बड़ी अच्छी तरह से बताया कि आज की तारीख में स्टूडेंट्स का plight क्या है, टीचर्स की सिचुएशन क्या है, और हमारे सामने बड़ी बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं, इनइक्विटीज, क्वालिटी और दूसरे एजुकेशन सिस्टम की, उनका सामना हमने मिलजुल के हम कैसे कर सकते हैं। मैं सबसे पहले आपको सिर्फ एक बैकग्राउंड के हिसाब से राइट टू एजुकेशन के बारे में बताना चाहता हूं, उसकी जेनेसिस। राइट टू एजुकेशन जो इंडिया में एक्ट बना, उसमें 3 दृष्टिकोण से अपने को देखना चाहिए। पहला दृष्टिकोण अंतरराष्ट्रीय। जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट के सामने ये केस आया कि इंडिया में राइट टू एजुकेशन संवैधानिक राइट है या नहीं है, तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये राइट टू एजुकेशन तो सरकार का ऑब्लिगेशन है, चाहे सरकार मानती या नहीं मानती, क्योंकि सरकार ने अंतरराष्ट्रीय कानूनों में ये ऑब्लिगेशन ले लिया है। और ये सही बात है। बहुत सारे 8 इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कन्वेंशन है जिनमें भारत का ये ऑब्लिगेशन है, रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि शिक्षा एक इनएलिजिबल राइट है, हर एक का जन्म से अधिकार है। लेकिन दूसरा उसमें इश्यू ये था सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कि ये बात भूल जाओ कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में है या नहीं है, राइट टू एजुकेशन तो भारतीय संस्कृति में हर आदमी का इनएलिजिबल राइट है, और इसलिए राइट टू एजुकेशन उन्होंने राइट टू लाइफ माना। तो इसमें 2 दृष्टिकोण जुड़े हुए हैं। एक तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल बेसिस, संवैधानिक उसका आधार, जिसके अनुसार राइट टू एजुकेशन आर्टिकल 21 में और पहले से ही है। जब आपका राइट टू लाइफ है तो राइट टू एजुकेशन है। लेकिन राइट टू एजुकेशन आप भारतीय संस्कृति में, भारतीय जो अपनी सांस्कृतिक धरोहर है उसमें भी है, क्योंकि एजुकेशन के बिना, ज्ञान के बिना, विद्या के बिना जीवन जीने का कोई खास अर्थ नहीं रहता। इसलिए हर एक का ये अधिकार होना चाहिए, मौलिक अधिकार, कि उनको शिक्षा मिले। अब जब अपन राइट टू एजुकेशन की तरफ देखते हैं और जितने भी चैलेंजेस हैं, तो हमें इन तीनों दृष्टिकोण को सामने रखना चाहिए। जैसे प्रोफेसर शांति सिन्हा ने बताया, हम सब जानते हैं कि देश के सामने बहुत बड़ी समस्याएं हैं। इसको इस शिक्षा में जो जिसको बहिष्कार कह सकते हैं या मार्जिनलाइज कहते हैं, बहुत सारे बच्चे जिनको शिक्षा मिलती नहीं है, मिलती है तो बहुत ही घटिया क्वालिटी की मिलती है, उनको शिक्षा पूरी अच्छी तरह से मिलनी चाहिए और अधिकार की तरह मिलनी चाहिए। तो अंतरराष्ट्रीय लेवल पर, अंतरराष्ट्रीय स्तर पर जो कन्वेंशन है उसमें ये क्लियर है ऑब्लिगेशन में, इंडिया के जो ऑब्लिगेशन है, हर देश का जो उसको मानते हैं उनका ऑब्लिगेशन है कि सभी को शिक्षा मिलनी चाहिए, कोई भी उससे वंचित नहीं रहना चाहिए। एवरीबडी इज एंटाइटल्ड टू एजुकेशन। इसलिए अगर एक बच्चे को भी शिक्षा नहीं मिलती तो ये उन सिद्धांतों का उल्लंघन होता है, उनका अपन पालन नहीं कर रहे हैं। लेकिन उसमें यह भी है कि कुछ ऐसी बातें हैं जिनके आधार पर किसी तरह का भेदभाव नहीं होना चाहिए। जैसे आपकी सामाजिक स्थिति क्या है, आर्थिक स्थिति क्या है, सामाजिक लेवल क्या है, आपके पास कितनी प्रॉपर्टी है, नहीं है, आपका जाति क्या है, इसके धर्म क्या है, इसके आधार पर कोई भेदभाव नहीं होना चाहिए। इसलिए अंतरराष्ट्रीय कानून के अनुसार शिक्षा एक यूनिवर्सल राइट है जिसको किसी भी तरह का भेदभाव के बिना, किसी भी तरह का एक्सक्लूजन या के बिना मिलना चाहिए। इसी तरह अगर अपन अपने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के, संविधान की तरफ देखें तो ये क्लियर है कि संविधान के अंदर शिक्षा के अधिकार का बहुत ही सॉलिड बेसिस है, बड़ा ठोस अधिक उसका स्तर है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल हम सब जानते हैं कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में ये क्लियर कट लिखा हुआ है शुरू में कि भारत का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन भारत के लोगों ने इसलिए बनाया कि सबको न्याय मिले, सामाजिक, न्याय मिले, आर्थिक न्याय मिले, पॉलिटिकल राजनीतिक न्याय मिले, जस्टिस सोशल इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल। और इसके साथ साथ शिक्षा का प्रोविजन है आर्टिकल 14 में, जिसमें सबको इक्वलिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी होनी चाहिए। इक्वलिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी आर्टिकल 14 में एक संवैधानिक अधिकार है। और मैं इसके बारे में एक चित्रा वर्सेस कमला घोष, जो चित्रा घोष वर्सेस यूनियन ऑफ इंडिया का केस है 1969 का, वो साइड करना चाहता हूँ। उस केस में सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा, और मैं केस को उसका फाइंडिंग आपको बताना चाहता हूँ, कि इक्वलिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी फॉर द नेशन फॉर एजुकेशनल एडवांसमेंट is a fundamental right, and therefore every Indian should be enabled to strive towards excellence in education। तो उन्होंने समानता का अधिकार बताया, उन्होंने क्वालिटी का अधिकार बताया, और ये आजकल की सिचुएशन के अंदर बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। इसके साथ साथ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में एक और प्रोविजन है जिसकी तरफ हमें खास तौर से ध्यान देना चाहिए, और वो है आर्टिकल 46। उस आर्टिकल में क्लियरली लिखा हुआ है कि अपने देश में जितने भी शेड्यूल कास्ट है, जितने भी शेड्यूल ट्राइब और वीकर सेक्शंस ऑफ सोसाइटी है, उनको शिक्षा का मौलिक अधिकार है और सरकार को उसको आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए। मैं आपको उस आर्टिकल के बारे में पढ़ना चाहता हूँ क्योंकि बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। उसमें लिखा हुआ है अंग्रेजी में, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एंजॉइंस अपॉन स्टेट द ऑब्लिगेशन टू प्रमोट विद स्पेशल केयर, खास उसके ऊपर ध्यान रख करके, द एजुकेशन एंड एजुकेशनल एंड इकोनॉमिक इंटरेस्ट ऑफ द वीकर सेक्शंस ऑफ सोसाइटी। जो पिछड़े हुए लोग हैं उनका एक खास तौर से उनको ध्यान रखना चाहिए, इन पर्टिकुलर शेड्यूल कास्ट एंड शेड्यूल ट्राइब्स, एंड प्रोटेक्ट देम फ्रॉम सोशल इनजस्टिस एंड ऑल फॉर्म्स ऑफ एक्सप्लॉयटेशन। ये मैं खास तौर से बताना चाहता हूं क्योंकि जब इन लोगों का शिक्षा का अधिकार नहीं होता है तो समाज के अंदर सोशल जस्टिस नहीं होता है और एक्सप्लॉयटेशन चलता है, और वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का बहुत ही ग्रॉस वायलेशन है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का बड़ा उल्लंघन है। अब ये मैंने इसलिए कहा कि आप अगर आज की तारीख में अपने देश की स्थिति देखें, और ये मजदूरों का प्लाइट, और जो भी इंट्रोडक्शन में मिस्टर अम्बरीश और प्रोफेसर शांता सिन्हा ने कहा बिल्कुल सच है कि कितने लोगों को आप देखें, भारत की 1/3 से ज्यादा जनता गरीब है, एक्सट्रीम पॉवर्टी है सरकार के अनुसार, यूनाइटेड नेशंस के अनुसार। उन लोगों के बच्चों का क्या हो रहा है? उन लोगों के बच्चों को कैसे शिक्षा मिल सकती है? समानता के आधार पर, उनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल संवैधानिक अधिकार के आधार पर, और उनका सरकार को अपने अंतरराष्ट्रीय जो उनके रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, उत्तरदायित्व है, उसके अनुसार कैसे करना चाहिए। इसमें एक खास जो शिक्षा के अधिकार को पूरा नहीं करने में रुकावट है, ग्रेट इम्पीडिमेंट, वो है प्राइवेटाइजेशन इन एजुकेशन, निजीकरण एजुकेशन में। बहुत आजकल हिंदुस्तान में, खास अपने देश में खास तौर से, लेकिन काफी विकसित देशों में एक निजीकरण की तरफ बहुत बड़ा ट्रेंड बन गया है, और बहुत ही ज्यादा तादाद में सरकारी स्कूलें, सरकारी यूनिवर्सिटीज कम हो रही है, जबकि प्राइवेट स्कूलें बन रही है। और उन प्राइवेट स्कूलों के अंदर जिस तरह की शिक्षा का सिस्टम है, वो इन तीनों जो मैंने मूल बात कही है उनका उल्लंघन है। अंतरराष्ट्रीय भारत के जो उत्तरदायित्व है उन अंतरराष्ट्रीय नियम है ना भारत के संविधान के अंदर। और
सर, स्पीक इन इंग्लिश आल्सो, people are
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is a violation on all 3 counts, on international obligation of India, on our constitutional right, and particularly on India's ancient civilizational value, spiritual heritage. For example, privatization, first of all we must understand, अपने को समझना चाहिए कि सरकारी स्कूलें होनी चाहिए, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ अपने माइनॉरिटी एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन का भी प्रोविजन है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में। माइनॉरिटी रिलीजियस और कल्चरल माइनॉरिटीज की एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशन के सिवाय इन प्रिंसिपल, सिद्धांत के अनुसार सारा सरकारी सिस्टम होना चाहिए, और क्योंकि सरकार का दायित्व है इसलिए आज की तारीख में पब्लिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम को बढ़ाना चाहिए। हालांकि पब्लिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम इज श्रिंकिंग, उसके बढ़ाती नहीं हो रही है, इसलिए प्राइवेटाइजेशन इन प्रिंसिपल एक बहुत ही गलत, अनएक्सेप्टेबल चीज है, और खास तौर से शिक्षा को व्यापार बनाना। वाजपेयी ने कहा था जब 2003 में यूनेस्को की मीटिंग हुई थी, वी सी रिच मैन्स स्कूल एंड पुअर मैन्स स्कूल, और उस तारीख से आज तक ये सब बढ़ रहा है। और उससे शिक्षा व्यापार बन गई है। क्या अपने इन आवर कल्चर, इन आवर हेरिटेज, इन आवर स्पिरिचुअल वैल्यूज, कैन विद्या बिकम व्यापार? इंडिया, भारत के देश में हम अगर भारत का कोई भी गर्व करते हैं तो क्या एक विद्या को व्यापार बनाना किसी भी भारतीय को मंजूर करना चाहिए? उसके खिलाफ में विद्रोह नहीं करना चाहिए। इसलिए हमारा सबका ये उत्तरदायित्व है कि प्राइवेटाइजेशन में जो स्कूलें बन रही है, जिस तरह से उनको छूट दी जा रही है, उसके ऊपर गंभीरता से प्रोटेस्ट करें और उसको खत्म करने के तरफ सरकार को आग्रह करें कि सब कदम उठाए जाए, ऑल स्टेप्स टू बी टेकन इन ऑर्डर टू मिटिगेट दिस इविल ऑफ प्राइवेटाइजेशन। उसका काफी इविल है। सबसे बड़ा उसका इविल यह है कि समाज में असमानता करना है। ये लोग प्राइवेटाइजेशन कैटर्स टू द रिच सेक्शंस ऑफ द पीपल एंड देयरफॉर क्रिएट्स सम काइंड ऑफ सोशल एसिमेट्री। इट इज ए ब्लो टू द रेस्पेक्ट फॉर रेस्पेक्टिंग कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ द कंट्री। इसलिए इस असमानता को प्राइवेटाइजेशन जिस ढंग से आगे बढ़ा रहा है वो देश के लिए अच्छा नहीं है। वो किस तरह की संस्कृति पढ़ाते हैं प्राइवेटाइजेशन में? वो सिर्फ आपको कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर में एक अच्छा सिटीजन कैसे बनना चाहिए, कंज्यूमर सिटीजन कैसे बनना चाहिए, ये उनका फोकस है और इसलिए बढ़ रहा है। और मोस्ट अनफॉर्चुनेट थिंग इन इंडिया इज दैट गवर्नमेंट्स आर प्रमोटिंग प्राइवेटाइजेशन, इन सम केसेस इवन कोलैबोरेटिंग। और उसके अंदर इस तरह से अन्याय हो रहा है, great social injustice in the sense, and Professor Shanta Sinha said this rightly, that teachers themselves are also part of this victimization process. Teachers ko becharon ko, they don't have permanent job, they don't have respect for their teaching qualifications and their contribution. They are on contractual basis, and there is great exploitation of teachers, and there are lot of excuses in order to say that they are not making money, they are not finding qualified teachers, etc., etc., and therefore that is a threat to the teaching profession. लेकिन मैं एक खास बात पर जोर देना चाहता हूँ. I would like to emphasize one thing very specifically, and that is something which deserves our consideration in the context of today's situation of COVID, and that is the right to education digital age. आजकल की जो डिजिटल डिवाइसेस बन रहा है, जिससे कंप्यूटर टेक्नोलॉजी को और सारे स्मार्टफोन और दूसरे डिवाइसेस को प्रमोट किया जा रहा है, उसके शिक्षा के ऊपर बुरा असर भी है, अच्छा असर भी है. अच्छा असर बहुत कम है, बुरा असर बहुत ही ज्यादा है. अच्छा असर यह है कि अपनी कनेक्टिविटी मिलती है, आप मटेरियल ढूंढ सकते हैं, देख सकते हैं, दूसरी जगह लोगों को पहुंच सकते हैं. लेकिन ये सिर्फ एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट है, ये एक साधन है, और उस साधन को दुरुपयोग की तरह यूज किया जा रहा है, वो नहीं होना चाहिए. दुरुपयोग कैसे हो रहा है? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, जो डिजिटल डिवाइसेस है, सबसे बड़ा उसका नतीजा तो ये देखने को आता है कि डिजिटल डिवाइड, डिजिटल गैप. ये देश में जो धनवान लोग हैं, जिनके पास पैसा है, those who are well to do, those who can afford, they can purchase those devices, and not the masses of the citizens of India. More than 1/3 of people who are victims of extreme poverty, and who therefore either are remain deprived of these devices or cannot afford. And therefore we need to look into the consequences of digitalization of education, digitalization system on education, in order to ensure that digitalization does not lead to aggravating the existing gap in the society. असमानता डिजिटलाइजेशन से नहीं बढ़े, लेकिन इससे एक बहुत बड़ा खतरा है. मैं उसकी तरफ आपका ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहता हूँ. आपको सबको पता है कि फेक न्यूज होता है आजकल, बहुत उसकी चर्चा चल रही है. कोई भी किसी भी तरह का इंफॉर्मेशन लोड कर सकता है. हर तरह की इंफॉर्मेशन कंप्यूटर पे मिल सकती है, चाहे वो सही है चाहे गलत है, और कई जगह गलत है. और उसके साथ एक जुड़ा हुआ एक और है फिनोमेना, एक और ट्रेंड है, वो ये है कि बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां अनब्रिडल्ड आउटराइट पब्लिसिटी में लगी हुई है, सिटीजन को कंज्यूमर समझ करके. और अपन कंप्यूटर की तरफ प्रोग्राम टीवी में देखें तो खूब प्रचार अंधाधुंध धड़ाधड़ आ रहे हैं, जिसके ऊपर किसी तरह की रोक नहीं है. और इसका कारण यह है कि लोगों को किसी तरह एक कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर के अंदर आगे बढ़ाया जाए. अब इसका नतीजा क्या होता है शिक्षा के ऊपर? इसका नतीजा यह है, और उसके अंदर दो चीजें बड़ी जरूरी है. एक मैं आपको कोट करना चाहता हूं, चार्ल्स इवंस, उसने एक नॉवल लिखा है, एक्ट ऑफ फेथ, द एक्ट ऑफ फेथ. उसने एक बहुत अच्छी चीज कही है, मैं कोट करूंगा इंग्लिश में. उसने कहा है, वी आर स्विमिंग इन द ओशन ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन एंड सिंकिंग इन इग्नोरेंस. आजकल की ये सारी इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी, उसमें कोई ज्ञान कुछ नहीं है, और ये शिक्षा को किसी भी तरह से हेल्पफुल नहीं है, क्योंकि सारी इंफॉर्मेशन जो है वो सिर्फ इंफॉर्मेशन है जिसको यूज करना नहीं आता, जिनको टीचर्स को यूज करना नहीं आता, और उसके कारण लोगों की इग्नोरेंस बढ़ रही है। अपने अपने शिक्षा के मूल्य क्या है, शिक्षा में चरित्र क्या होना चाहिए, शिक्षा के गुण क्या हैं, वो नहीं जानते। किसी ने बड़ी अच्छी तरह से कहा है कि शिक्षा का मतलब है ह्यूमन बीइंग को ये बताना हाउ टू बी ह्यूमन, हाउ टू बीइंग ह्यूमन इज द मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग। वो किसी भी तरह से इसमें, इस तरह की टेक्नोलॉजी में और इस तरह के प्राइवेटाइजेशन में जो दोनों जुड़े हुए हैं, उसमें इसका कोई स्थान नहीं है। भारत की दृष्टिकोण से, फ्रॉम पॉइंट ऑफ इंडिया, आई वुड लाइक टू मेंशन वन extremely important phenomena which deserves consideration and which deserves to be taken up as a cause for advocacy. And that phenomena is based on a book by Nicola Carr, What Does Internet Do to Our Brain? ये बहुत ही अच्छी किताब है। And he has written that because of internet there are two major consequences. One, constantly because of booming publicity, our concentration is being interrupted. So we cannot concentrate if we use internet as such. और ये बिल्कुल सच बात है। और इसका मतलब है कि आप एक अपने दिमाग को एक तरफ किसी भी चीज में लगा ही नहीं सकते, क्योंकि आपका कंसंट्रेशन उससे बुरी तरह से प्रभावित होता है। लेकिन उसके साथ साथ योर फैकल्टी ऑफ कंटेम्पलेशन इज ऑल्सो डिमिनिश्ड, एंड इफ your faculty of concentration and computation, both of them are diminished, then essence of humanity is diminished. Essence of humanity is something which we are losing. ये उनके कंक्लूजन है। और ये कंक्लूजन भारत के लिए खास तौर से महत्वपूर्ण है, क्योंकि हमारी संस्कृति में कंसंट्रेशन और कंटेम्पलेशन ये दो की पिलर हैं एजुकेशन सिस्टम के और भारतीय ट्रेडिशंस की, हमारे देश की जो ट्रेडिशन है इसके लिए। इसके साथ साथ मैं आपको कुछ और भी बताना चाहता हूं। प्रोफेसर शांति सिन्हा ने अच्छी तरह से बताया कि आप डिजिटल डिवाइसेस में सरकार हर तरह से उनको थोप रही है, और उस डिजिटल डिवाइसेस के कारण गरीब लोगों के जो बच्चे हैं किस तरह से वो उनको खरीद सकते हैं, उनके पास पैसा कहां से होगा। तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा प्रोत्साहन है बड़ी कंपनियों को कि अपना सामान बेचें, और बच्चों के ऊपर इस तरह से एक सिस्टम डिवाइस किया जा रहा है जिसमें टीचर पेडागोजी, जिसमें वैल्यू जो एजुकेशन है वो नहीं है। और ये अंतरराष्ट्रीय भारत की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, उसका उल्लंघन है, क्योंकि हर आप कोई भी इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन ले लीजिए, वेरी क्लियर मेंशन ऑफ द एसेंशियल ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ एजुकेशन, ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ पीस, फ्रेटर्निटी, respect for each other's culture, and so on and so forth. All these objects are being victim of this information technology, use of digital devices in education, and we must therefore be extremely concerned with this privatization. Privatization also is against the decisions of the Supreme Court. और इसमें सबसे बड़ा एक जो इश्यू है वो है फीस। अब आप देखते हैं कि जो the private schools, there is very little regulation in few countries, but it's not even applied in few states, sorry. And therefore the private schools have unbridled freedom to impose any kind of fee and make money, and they have become business, the phenomenon of education as a business. अब इसके अंदर सुप्रीम कोर्ट का डिसीजन है, वो डिसीजन था मिस मोहनी जैन वर्सेस स्टेट ऑफ कर्नाटका 1992 में। और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा कि शिक्षा के नाम पर अगर कैपिटेशन फी ली जाती है तो ये एक पेटेंट डिनाइल ऑफ आवर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल ऑब्लिगेशन ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। पेटेंट डिनाइल, ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का जो अधिकार है उसको वंचित करता है, उससे डिनाइल है, पेटेंट डिनाइल, बहुत जबरदस्त तरीके से, और इसको हमें अपोज करना चाहिए। अब अगर आज कोविंद के दृष्टिकोण में देखते हैं तो आपने पढ़ा होगा, मैंने भी पढ़ा है कि प्राइवेट स्कूलें कहती है कि हमें तो फीस देनी चाहिए आपको, चाहे बच्चे आते हैं चाहे नहीं आते हैं। इस तरह का क्या अन्याय हो रहा है। वी आर विटनेसिंग ग्रेट सिचुएशन ऑफ इनजस्टिस टू चिल्ड्रन in private schools and parents where they are forced to pay fee even though the schools are closed, even though there is absolutely no expenditure. Teachers are being used for other work because they are not engaged in teaching. तो इस तरह की जो एब्यूजिव प्रैक्टिसेस हैं जिनको कुछ स्टेट सपोर्ट भी कर रहे हैं लेकिन कोई अपोज नहीं कर रहा है, ये देश के लिए बहुत दुर्भाग्य की बात है। इसके लिए प्राइवेटाइजेशन के ऊपर बहुत ही अपने को गंभीर तरीके से सोचना चाहिए, और वी नीड टू रेगुलेट ए सिस्टम व्हिच शुड टोटली be devoted to regulating this in a most stringent manner. और दुनिया के, मेरे पास टाइम नहीं है, कई देश हैं जिसमें ये एग्जाम्पल हैं कि किस तरह से उसको कंट्रोल किया जा सकता है। और कई जगह चाइना में, सिंगापुर में और बहुत देश हैं, जी मैं कई देश सुना सकता हूँ जहाँ पर इसको कंट्रोल करने का बहुत अच्छा सिस्टम है। अपने को उनसे सीखना चाहिए। लेकिन इन एनी केस ये इंडिया का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन है कि अगर अपन भारत के कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की किसी तरह उसको रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं, उसको खास जो उसकी स्पिरिट है सोशल जस्टिस, उस स्पिरिट को लाना चाहते हैं, तो इट इज आवर लीगल रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, इज ए मॉरल इंपेरेटिव टू इंस्टॉल, टू रिस्पेक्ट social justice in education, and social justice is the greatest victim of the phenomenon of privatization in education. और इसलिए प्राइवेटाइजेशन ऑफ एजुकेशन के ऊपर अपना खास ध्यान देना चाहिए। मैंने यूनाइटेड नेशंस संयुक्त राष्ट्र संघ विधानसभा में, संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा में 2 रिपोर्ट इसके ऊपर पेश की, एक ह्यूमन राइट्स काउंसिल में है और इसके ऊपर सब मटेरियल है। मैंने राइट टू एजुकेशन इन डिजिटल डिवाइस के बारे में बोला, तो इसके बारे में भी आप पढ़ सकते हैं। तो मैं आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं। और अगर आपके किसी भी तरह का कोई कमेंट, क्वेश्चन या कोई विचार आप विमर्श करना चाहते हैं, तो मेरे लिए बड़ी खुशी होगी कि आपके साथ मैं मेरे आइडियाज शेयर कर सकूं। और मैं आखिर में आरटी फोरम को बहुत हार्दिक बधाई देना चाहता हूं कि ये पैनल ऑर्गेनाइज किया और हमें मौका दिया कि आपस में विचार विमर्श करें और इस तरह से शिक्षा के अधिकार को आगे बढ़ाने में किस तरह से हम उसको आगे बढ़ा सकते हैं, किस तरह से पब्लिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम को एक्सपेंड कर सकते हैं, उसके बारे में विचार करके इसके कॉज को लें और इसके अंदर इसके साथ साथ एक नेशनल लेवल पर कैंपेन शुरू करें जिसमें इन इश्यू पर, मुद्दों पर एडवोकेसी हो स्ट्रांगली, ताकि सरकार अपना उत्तरदायित्व निभाए। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद मेरे को सुनने के लिए।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर आपको। आपने बहुत ही अच्छे से आज के विषय को रखा और प्राइवेटाइजेशन के मुद्दे पर फोकस करते हुए कि कैसे ये बच्चों के अधिकार को छीनता है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। वी विल जस्ट कम बैक अगेन टू यू in the question answer session. So now I would request to Dr. Praveen Jha to address the webinar. Dr. Praveen Jha.
He is muted. I'm just unmuting him. Huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Amrish ji. Thank you, RT Forum, to include me in this conversation. We have had some excellent observations from Shanta ji and Kishore ji regarding a number of dimensions. What I propose to do is to focus almost entirely on issues relating to provisioning, financing, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is an issue on which almost everybody in the world is agreed. That unless you have adequate resources for education, it doesn't take you anywhere. In fact, if you recall the manifesto of BJP just before it came to power as NDA-2, it says most powerful tool for advancement of the nation and the most potent weapon to fight poverty is education and must be taken very seriously. Now, how do you take it seriously? If you do not provide for it, obviously there's no question of any seriousness, right? That is the context we need to keep in mind. RT has done a large number of studies over the years, essentially telling us that if we look at something very basic, most elementary, which is are schools RTE compliant? We are talking of elementary schools for which we have had right to education. And it is such a massive tragedy that you're talking of barely 10%, 12% of schools being RTE compliant. Let me also stress here that in any case, the way RTE norms were designed, the way they were arrived at, in a sense, we were looking at almost a minimalist approach. It is not the case that those norms were calculated with the kind of what I may consider or many of you would consider adequate provisioning. right? And I'll come to that in a minute. Right? What do we mean by adequate provisioning? Right? But before that, this in a sense tells you a complete mayhem that we have with respect to public provisioning of education when you have close to 90% schools or so, which are not RT compliant, which is not to say that private sector has schools which are all RT compliant. In fact, if you look at the bottom half there, probably it is much worse than what we have in the public sector for a variety of reasons. I mean, again, let me not get into details of it, but essentially we have had a situation where there has been a mushrooming of absolutely low quality private institutions as well. So, this simple binary, which is sometimes put in public domain, that there is a mushrooming of private schools because the quality there is better, is an extremely simplistic and indefensible kind of idea in its own right. We can talk about many other issues there, as Kishorji was talking about. So this is the first point we need to, in fact, acknowledge, that public provisioning has been horrible, which of course then, for certain segments of the population who can afford it, it pushes privatization and private schools. Also, unfortunately, it has been very much a part of our political economy of education in this country, where the elected representatives have actually got into the business of education on a large scale. So if you look at most of these institutions, in particular higher education, where you have huge returns to be made, but also in schools, you have all these elected representatives in hordes, both in North India, South India, and so on, but much more so in southern part of the country, and so on. So this whole issue of provisioning, in fact, over the years has actually become weaker as the country has become economically stronger, right? I studied in a village school with a, chatia, which I used to take there and so on when I started for 3-4 years, 5 years or so. I'm sure Ashok ji, Shanta ji, etc. would have had similar experiences. So there was a functioning system which was taken care of, and hence when we talk of resources, then we also need to talk about what are the other complementary resources, quality of teachers, etc. But let me not get into those details right away. But this is something which has to be the starting point, and this is something which did not start with COVID. This is something which has been there for a very long time. Right? As it happens, the situation has worsened. That is the important point. And Professor Amartya Sen recently, in one of his articles, put it very well, that India is probably the only country in the world which wishes to be an economic superpower without taking care of its education and health needs. Right? In fact, if we look at what has, as I said, happening over the years, it's a serious sort of challenge that we're talking about. Right? Now, if Kishorji was comparing with some countries in the developing world, China, Indonesia, we can globally do a comparison. And if you just do a table of, sort of what you can call unit cost for education, developed countries, developing countries, almost everybody beats us hollow. What we spend on education per child, and this should be the yardstick, the benchmark by which we should judge the public provisioning or the provisioning for education in general. Right? Our unit costs are laughable. Right? I mean, what we, per child expenditure, etc. So if you just do a comparison, and there are lots of studies which are there. So let me not get into details of these, but that is the bottom line. What, basic benchmark, what we provide, let's say, for different aspects, whether it is, let's say, teachers training or anything, you just name any of those things. Right? You find that our effort, and in the aggregate as well, is something which is among the worst in the world. Countries which are much poorer than us, right? In sub-Saharan Africa, in terms of unit costs are actually doing much better. And that is the huge tragedy. And that tragedy has, of course, become very much part of the political economy of development, and in particular, political economy of education. You know, MC Chagla, Muhammad Karim Chagla, our education minister, 1966, at the time of the Kothari report, you know, he had said that it is a huge tragedy that we put our children in hovels. In hovels, this is the phrase that he used, in the name of education. Right? We just put them there and hope that things will become better. Oh, of course not. Right? So that recognition has been there all through, that look, we need to do a lot more. And then we have been talking about, as everybody in this conversation knows, 6%, etc. on education. Right? So, but where have we been? I mean, if you look at, let's say, the last 5 years, 10 years, right? We're basically talking of somewhere, the aggregate as a percentage of GDP, we are talking of less than 4%, between 3 and 4%. If you look at the allocation by the union government, in fact, if you just look at 2014-15 and the most recent estimate, it came down from about 0.64% to about 0.45% or so, right? Now, that itself is going down. This brings to my second point, which I want to highlight in the context of provisioning and financing, etc. Essentially, what has happened after the second Finance Commission, 14th Finance Commission, is that union government has decided that states should bear more and more financial responsibility for education. And the argument was that, look, with the 14th Finance Commission recommendations, states will get more untied fund from 32% to 42%. You know, if that is happening, then there was a second step which was taken, which was completely wrong, that now states will have more resources. Yes, indeed, there was an untying of resources, okay? But in terms of aggregate, if you look at what has happened to the states as a share, you know, there has been no noticeable increase in the share of states' resources. What actually has happened is that states have become much more vulnerable, especially after GST, Goods and Services Tax, now, which we have seen in the last 3 months. In fact, in the huge financial package that presumably this package, which was a stimulus, etc., which was a joke on population of this country. If you have any questions, I can give you details, etc. Right? But this whole so-called 20 lakh crore was yet another of those, multi-million jumlas. Right? Effectively, there was very little which actually has been part of fiscal stimulus and so on and so forth. But coming back to the point that I wanted to sort of underscore, if you look at the GST which needed to be transferred by the union government from December to March, even that had not been transferred to the state governments by April, or in fact till date. Now you can say that, okay, March COVID hit us, but what was happening? Why is it that, December to March, there is no transfer, right? So what happens to the states in the current crisis when they're trying to take care of challenges emanating from COVID? They have been flattened. Their own resources, they have come down to something like 10 to 20% of what they were raising every month. But given the lockdown and multiple dimensions of it, that has simply crashed, right? Center is not even giving them the sort of dues which have been there for earlier months as well, right? So this thinking that states will do more, 14th Finance Commission recommendations, but then subsequently GST, etc., on the whole has made states much more vulnerable to any financial shock, because their economic basis for raising resources has decreased very considerably, right? If that happens, then what can the states do? And since much of the thing has to be done by the states, most of the responsibilities are handled by the state, it's just a bizarre situation that we are caught in, right? So this was one major thing. So basically, union government is saying that state should do more and more, and if they're not doing, it's their problem. Who cares? Education is not necessarily our responsibility, even if it is in the concurrent list. And that is the mindset, which was a very significant change with NDA-2. Right? The other very significant change with NDA-2 was again a very bizarre thing in terms of resources, that there is no relationship between input and output. Financial provisioning is not something which is a very important prerequisite for quality education. Now, can anything be more bizarre than that? Right? In fact, this is a statement, there is a paper by Niti Aayog, which says that inputs don't matter as much as people talk about. States already have resources and they can't use that, they can't spend that, and so on and so forth, right? So we should not be worrying about that. We should look at other things to ensure how education can be taken care of, and so on. So these very explicit shifts, which have happened in the recent years, is something we need to keep on the front burner to understand what is happening to provisioning for education across the country. Again, some states are doing better than others. I'm not getting into those details right now. The third thing, which again was a terrible move, the way I understand, was to sort of, introduce Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, and I'm talking of a terrible move from the point of view of guaranteed provisioning, right? Neither pre-primary school nor secondary school was brought into the ambit of right to education, right? But basically, the allocations now are now made for this entire combined Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, effectively then weakening whatever we had as the right to education, even at the elementary level. Right? Now that is something that we need to certainly keep in mind. Right? Then we have had so much talk about this national policy and education. We have been kind of hearing a great deal about it. As Shantaji said, there is maybe a small ray of hope there, saying that, okay, we will also take care of the secondary education. But apart from that, effectively, it is a document for further privatization. It is a document essentially saying that, look, this is not going to be our responsibility, leaving it more and more to the market and so on. Right? So that is a sort of basic message. Those of you who have read that document carefully would certainly know it, but we can talk more about it. The next thing, this whole issue of digitalization, which was touched upon. Now, of course, nobody says that technology should not be used and so on and so forth. But how do you use that technology, and how do you bring that into the domain and the context of what could be quality education and so on? Right? So in general, there are lots of those issues, but as Kishorji emphasized, there is this huge challenge of inequalities in terms of access to technology itself. Right? And especially in emergency situation, you're saying that, okay, this is the only way to go forward and so on. Obviously, the exclusion would be that much more pronounced. Right? So that is something which we need to keep in mind. This government, since 2014, NDA-2, NDA-3, both of these have had this fascination, obsession for digitalization, as if digitalization is the answer to most of India's very basic problems. You do that, corruption will disappear. You do that, quality education can be imparted. What world are we living in? Right? Again, let me sort of certainly emphasize, nobody is opposed to the use of technology in good quality education. Of course, that has to be the case. But can that become a substitute? Can that be an alternative? That is the real question, and so on and so forth. Okay, I think I've taken a lot of time, so let me just try and conclude. In the context of COVID, what is that? In terms of its implication for, in general, for our economy, what COVID has done is to strip the stark and naked reality of this country in terms of multiple fault lines, in terms of massive inequalities. Now you see that something like 70-80% of the population is without anything in terms of past savings or any assured means of livelihood. Forget about education. I mean, to begin with, just that to keep your body and soul intact, we have seen all that. In fact, in terms of the impact, adverse impact on population at large in this country, this is many times worse than demonetization, right? And the recovery time is going to be that much longer. Yeah. Now, from the point of view of education, what does this mean? Right? Essentially, we are setting back. Education, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of provisioning, etc., has never been the priority of, in particular, this government, but also many other previous governments. They didn't take it seriously, right? The adequate seriousness was not there, right? I mean, yes, we talk of RT, we do SSA, we do all kinds of things, but then, we also realize that if 90% schools are not RT compliant, there is a huge problem in terms of, what you're professing and what you're actually doing, right? But this is something which is going to set us back with respect to education, by several years, precisely because the recovery itself is going to sort of take time. So what about all the lost children, right? Children who, in fact, there's a mini generation which is going to get impacted in an adverse fashion, in a much more aggravated fashion, right? As I said earlier, as Shantaji mentioned, that we should be looking at out of school children and not things like enrollment and so on, because that's utterly misleading, right? But many million more have become out of school. Most of them are unlikely to come back very soon. That is something which we need to understand, right? Because there is almost nothing in terms of even thinking. You have to have at least a basic philosophy, right? Of how do we reach them? How do we ensure that what to cater for, how to cater for, etc. Right? I think for the economy itself, as I said, which is supposed to be a much bigger challenge in everyone's imagination currently, we are at utter loss, right? What is being done is more of political stunt, right? More of, trying to sort of get into certain kinds of messaging without having anything on the ground. Education is much more on the sidelines right now. And at least for half a generation or so who are currently in the school or so, I can see that this has had massive kind of implications for them. Let me stop here. I would be very happy to respond to your clarifications, questions, etc. should you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, Dr. Praveen Jha. Now we are, our time is flying. So I would request Srijita to just pass on the questions which is already coming to at the chat box and start the second session. Yeah.
Yes, so we will take another 10 to 15 minutes to address many of the questions that have been raised in the chat box. So one question which is constantly coming up, especially from the side of parents, the parents who are participating in this webinar. I think Dr. Kishore Singh could perhaps address these questions because it's mostly related to privatization of education. So the questions that have come up is online education is being introduced for all classes from nursery to class 12. And this is being done just to impose fees from the parents. While there is a salary cut which is being faced by the middle class, the businesses are also shut down. Should the private schools not waive the fees completely in such a situation? Since the private schools already have a contingency fund, should it not be used in emergencies like this? This is one question which has come up from a number of parents whose children are in private schools. There's another question which has come up is the private schools, instead of prescribing NCERT textbooks, they have been prescribing books by private publishers which are costing way more. So Professor Dr. Kishore Singh, if you could please answer these questions.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
I'm very pleased that these questions were put. First of all, let me come back to say that if we are respectful of India's international obligations under human rights conventions, if we are respectful of our constitution and constitutional provisions, and if we are respectful of our own philosophic traditions in education and our civilizational values and spiritual heritage, there is absolutely no place for privatization in education. The primary core responsibility of education is of public authorities. Many countries this is so. Some countries which are introducing privatization are going in wrong direction legally and morally. But since there is assuming of privatization, there's a lot of expansion of such kind of schools with the false publicity of quality and many other considerations which are ill-founded. Let me say the first thing parents should do and civil society should do is to claim education as a right and say to the public authorities, to inspectors of schools, to local authorities, states, union authorities, that please provide education because it is our right, and as Professor Jha said, please provide educational, proper provisioning of education in terms of financial support. That is lacking. I am absolutely sure that if proper resources are devoted to education, there is a possibility of enlarging public school system and then slowly to wipe out, to diminish, eliminate privatization. But this is not being done because resources for education are being diminished and budget is inadequate, it is being reduced, and result is that privatization is growing. There is absolutely no reason for parents to opt for privatization and private schools simply because there is a huge propaganda. OECD, even respectful organization, has totally found it untenable, incorrect. But what is more important is the question of fee. I think that even if, for whatever reason, children are being sent to private schools, there are huge issues of fee. We should claim that there must be a reasonable amount of fee to be charged. For example, our bottom line should be what is the minimum wages, and if a poor family wants to send children to private schools, how much should be fee? And accordingly, the exorbitant fee that private schools are charging must be drastically regulated, and there is absolutely no reason to allow them total freedom to impose the fee and also the textbooks, as you said. Provision of textbook, including digital devices, is international obligation as part of right to education, and therefore it is responsibility of state, public authorities, NCERT. We have mechanisms in the first place to prescribe textbooks, in the second place to enforce the system on private schools. As I said already, privatization prepares us to be a consumer citizen and a good corporate citizen. Imbibe corporate culture. Try to learn to say hi instead of namaste, and the values which are totally materialistic values and deprived of humanistic vision of education. And therefore, there is a need to try to look into the phenomena of fees, but also the phenomena of textbooks and what Is the education content there? Who is teaching? What kind of teachers? Where are they trained? So on and so forth. So this is a huge trend of campaign which we need to engage in. But allow me 1 second more to point out something which I did not say, but which is absolutely, I think, important for us to consider, and that is the fraudulent practices in privatization of education. I'm absolutely sure, on the basis of my investigation report to United Nations General Assembly and elsewhere, that most of the accounts in developing countries, including India, in all private schools, I say it emphatically, are absolutely fraud and false. You need simply to look into, for example, we talk a lot of online education, digitalization. Look into the sites. Today, can you believe in India, for example, you can obtain a PhD by paying 5 lakh rupees? Can you believe that a degree can be obtained, a job can be got on the basis of false, fraudulent practice of privatization? Can you believe that huge amount of resources are amassed? Vidya has become vyapar, and still those privatization people pose philanthropic, say हम समाज की सेवा कर रहे हैं, and plead with the government to pay them, and government pays them subsidy. Instead of paying subsidy to private schools, why can't government expand public education system? So I think that I would most forcefully put this argument for all parents, all civil society organizations, anybody, all philanthropists, please try to uproot the phenomena of privatization when education has become a business. विद्या को किसी भी हालत में व्यापार मत बनने दीजिए. And then be very much aware of the right to education and rights of the parents and of the child. And if unfortunately you have to send children to private schools, claim those rights and go and try collectively through parents association, other means that you have to say that do not do this kind of fraudulent practices. Show off the accounts. We want to see how you get the money, how you spend, what is the salary of teachers. Can you believe that a teacher is signed a false certificate bill to receive the salary? Not all teachers are paid the salary that the private school bookkeeping keeps, private schools and their management. So the question is to make a law, a policy, if ideally that is possible, which is centered around regulatory system, which is prescriptive, prohibitory, and penal, criminal. There are countries like Singapore where, for example, employing unqualified teachers in private school, financial fraud is a crime. In India, we totally overlook. So I'm sorry I've taken a lot of time, the shortage of time, but I'm very, very concerned with these issues, and I think we need to launch a big national campaign in order to fight this evil, which is killing our spirit of education, the cause of education, and whole system of education. If it is allowed to develop on these lines, will make India a totally business-oriented, unbridled corporate sector without any respect for any Indian values, for any international obligations of India, and above all, with great disrespect for our constitutional system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So we'll take a question for Dr. Shanta Sinha. So the question has come from Ponenika Ray from NFIW. She talks about how do we reach the children who do not have access to online teaching. Is it possible to push for provisioning of free computers and Wi-Fi through the government, which will address both the short-term needs as well as the long-term need for the children? There is a similar question from Sloka Sinha, who is asking about if there's a way of using digital technology in a democratic manner to reach the children without access to online technology.
First of all, let me tell you, I have got nothing against technology. But then if technology is provided for all equally, it makes sense. We made a survey of 8,000 villages in Bihar to look at the policy which Bihar government has on introducing Doordarshan and online teaching for children from primary school onwards. Of the 8,000, only 2,000 had access to electricity in their homes. The rest didn't have access to anything. And even that was intermittent. They didn't have access to online. even the telephones were not 4G, even the 2G was interrupted. So what are you talking about technology for these children? First, I think let them have a school with, as Praveen Jha has stated, or as Kishore Singh ji has stated, let us have a school with full endowment of resources. Let there be provisioning of schools. Let's demand for that. School is a public good. Let us have government schools fully strengthened, full with all resources. And then, of course, all these facilities that they are online and anything else can be added as a complement to this, but certainly not a substitute to a regular school. It just cannot substitute to a school. This will certainly add to the value to the existing school, but how can it substitute for the existing school? Even for the poor, they deserve the kind of school our children go to, and let's fight for it. And these schools will have to be public schools, and our children should also be going to those schools. Let's have a school where all seek admission, where all go, where there is no inequities in education. Right now, I'm afraid there is an apartheid in education. The biggest divide is in the society is between those who have been to schools and those who have not been to schools. If there has to be a closure of this apartheid, government must be serious. I will end with saying what Praveen Jha has said, Professor Praveen Jha, what Kishore Singh ji has said, that you have to be serious about education in the country. There is total lack of consensus in this country, especially among the elite, that education is important for children and for India's democracy and India's development. They just don't seem to be caring. They never cared, now they don't care at all. And if this is a situation, I'm afraid sub-Saharan Africa will overtake India. We will no longer be talking about the great Indian empire, the great Indian economy, the great Indian self-tradition. We will look to Somalia to find out what we have to learn from them to make Indian schools better.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So we have a question for Professor Praveen Jha. So the question is from Yasmin. She is asking, what will it take in terms of provisioning for education to put universal elementary education on track post the COVID lockdown? So just a second, I will unmute her. Yes.
All right. Again, a serious, careful estimation needs to be done. We don't even know the extent of damage which will be done, is being done in terms of what will be required to rebuild people's lives. Because education is not something which you disconnect with everything else that a household needs, right? How do you sort of factor education also in that larger complex whole, etc. So it will take some time. But in any case, I'm sure you have heard it repeatedly that our goal was 6% of GDP. We have never been anywhere close to that, right? The deficit has been at least 2% at the best of times, right? Now, this will only aggravate it, the resource requirements, given the difficulties, the challenges, how many households have actually fallen through the cracks, fallen through, all these very difficult kind of circumstances into penury and so on and so forth. So what kind of a comprehensive resource package for education is required? That we need to think of. And that, to my mind, is something which needs to be worked out carefully. I do not want to just float a number for the sake of it. But I think we need to begin with, what we already know in terms of the gaps in resources that we have, unit costs being so low, some 800,000 or 8 lakh teachers being untrained. If you just go norm by norm, right, lots of estimations have been there. What is it that is required to take care of the deficit? RT Forum has been doing some of these exercises, sort of the extent of the shortfall and so on and so forth. So my sense is it would be anywhere between, let's say, 2 to 3% if we go by conservative norms. I'm not talking of the same kind of facilities, same kind of provisioning which you have, let's say, in OECD countries. Right? Now, incidentally, in OECD countries, more than 90% of schools, even today, after all this liberalization and so on, okay, continue to be what is known as government schools. Right? Overwhelming majority of children go there, and those schools are doing kind of a fantastic job. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Finally, where will the resources come from? If you have a will, there is a way. There's no dearth of sort of possibilities. There are lots of ideas. I would request some of you to look at Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, which is a major governance and budgetary initiative reflecting on budgets of different governments, etc., of which Shantaji used to be president, continues to be in the board of that. It has given lots of ideas, how to raise resources. So since we don't have time, I'm not getting into details of it, but it is not a problem, right, if we want to move on that particular. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we just have a couple of minutes left. So one question to which probably Professor Shanta Sinha could answer is what are the alternatives to online education, since we are taking into cognizance the digital divide? There has been a number of questions, a number of people who are asking this question. So what are the alternatives to digital education to ensure that children remain within the ambit of education, since schools will remain closed for another couple of months? Professor Shanta Sinha, if you could answer.
I think asking a wrong question will give you a wrong answer, because you've posed the question of digital divide, digital education as an alternative to education. It is certainly not an alternative. So you will have to look at the politics of this digitalization of education and even posing it as an alternative. I mean, let's look, I will have to take another half an hour session on this. I think the core is strengthening education. And as I began, I said it is okay if schools close for another 2 months. I'm perfectly all right with it. At least you're acknowledging schools are important and you're publicly stating it is closing for 2 months. We'll reopen it later after COVID and children are to come. But if you're doing it, if you're not acknowledging the schools are important, then you're sending a message that, look, after COVID, let us do this digitalization as an alternative. I have a problem with the way the question itself is posed. And as I told you, this digitalization or online is very, I think, it takes away the notion of the debate on what is education, why education, what the purpose of education, the goal of education. It somewhere limits it to only some reading and writing and doing some mathematics. And there are profound theories on what is education and the goal of education. None of that will be resolved through this process of some mantra of online education. You want me to give another lecture? I can.
Ma'am, there is another question for you. It is about gender-sensitive strategies for universalization of education post-COVID-19 pandemic.
I think this is a very, very important question. We have full evidence to show how vulnerable girls, children have been during the COVID, and how much of burden of work there is at a household because because of gender discrimination and patriarchy. Also, the way girls are being pushed to work in agriculture. There are many girls who are young, who are not even 18, who are now pushed to doing NREGA work. and there is instances of violence and abuse on girls. So I think this is a serious issue. This will also, I think, put girls to risk who are already going to school and who have come, and perhaps there would be greater number of school dropouts. We will have to be very aware. We will have to create double awareness and double tracking of girls to see that their aspirations for education continues. Let me tell you, no girl who has gone to school would like to get out of school. Girls want to be in school. They see justice only be in school. So let us give full support and tell her that we are all with you, and express solidarity with her and tell her that you exercise agency, we are with you, we will see that you go to school. Once the schools reopen, there will have to be a verification of attendance register, track every child whose name is there in the attendance register, and get every child back to school. This is the exercise that has to be taken in all schools in the country. I mean, there cannot be any question of girls being out of school.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for elaborating it. So I think it's already 1 o'clock, and we will have to end this now. So I would just invite Amrish ji to thank the panelists.
Okay. So thank you for your deliberations, Santaji, Dr. Praveen Jha, Dr. Kishore Singh ji. Thank you very much, so much for the participation, for address the webinar, and the participants also. We are just this online discussion. RT Forum is taken up very seriously because this is again a segregation of majority of the children through this online, and they want to legitimize the home schooling, and that is the that is a threat for the school and our education system and equitable and quality education for what we are struggling since decades. So we are organizing a meeting with Teachers Association because nobody is asking the opinion of teachers, and MHRD is not asking, no state governments are in the conversation with the Teachers Association. So we are organizing a consultation with teachers on these critical issues emerged after this COVID-19 pandemic, and we will evolve a consensus on this issue, and that is on 24th. So that is information I want to give all of you, and thank you for coming, and thank you for joining this webinar. Thank you once again. Thank you.